Hi designers, let's talk about multi-level structures in SketchUp. Because of SketchUp's flexibility, there is of course more than one way to do this. So I'm going to show you two ways and I'm going to include my preferred method. So method number one would be drawing the first floor and 3D modeling it as you see here, and drawing the second floor separately right next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as I talk and just draw the floor right next to it. So I'm going to get my rectangle tool and begin to draw and model the second floor. So I've got my rectangle. I'm going to group it together, Command G, or right click, make group. And now we need to double click in it with our select tool to work on it. I'm going to pull it forward maybe 6 to 8 inches to create some thickness. And now this will be the floor of my second story, and this will be the ceiling of my first story. So at this point, we really could just go ahead and move this on top here, but for the sake of this example, I'm going to keep modeling it right next to it. So now I'm going to double click and draw the draw the walls of the second story right on top of this floor. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring it out with my guidelines, and then I'll go ahead and draw the floors, fill it in with geometry with either my line tool or my rectangle tool. And now this is the basic shape of the walls above. This is going to be roof line and the top of my patio. So I'm going to offset this, offset it 6 inches, and now I need to pull it up 6 feet. It's going to have a gable here and 2 gables over here, so it's a bit of a modern farmhouse. So the walls on the second story are only going to be 6 feet. Okay, so now I've modeled it as much as I'd like to, and I'm going to move it on top of the first floor. So I'm going to grab it right here on the edge, on the bottom corner, not on the edge, on the end point there, and match it up with the end point of the patio below. Click and release to drop it. Okay, so now that looks like it lined up pretty well with what I was hoping for. We can see that those walls lined up, the top level lines up with the bottom level pretty nicely, and the back does as well. But that was because I knew the exact dimensions. If you don't know the exact dimensions, that might be a little bit more tricky. And you can see that I need a penetration in the floor for the staircase, for the stairwell, but I'm going to do that in my next example. So that was the first example, drawing it right next to it and then moving it on top of the first level. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to work on the second example. So because, this is method number 2. And method number 2 would be building your first floor as usual. And all of you floor plan and 3D modeling students of mine know how to do this. You know that everything is part of a group. So when I click around with my select tool, I can see that everything is grouped together with these blue bounding boxes. And now when we draw the second level directly on top of the first level, nothing is going to stick to it. There's no loose geometry. Nothing's going to stick to our second level when I draw it. So I'm going to draw my rectangle from one end point to the next, and I'm going to group that together. Double click into it to work on it and pull it up about 6 to 8 inches or however thick of a floor / ceiling you need. And again, we're going to just continue to draw right on top of here. But first, I'm going to use these bottom walls as guidelines. So I can double click on these edges with my tape measure tool and create guidelines. Don't double click on the edges or on the endpoints. Make sure you're double clicking on the edges, and it's just speeding up the process to let me know where these walls are, because I know the plan is to line them up. So double click into this floor area And now I can use those to begin. Oop, I don't think that quite lined up. There we go. I can use those to create the shape. Offset 6 inches and pull that up 6 feet. So again, we've ended up in the same spot as before. We've just done it a lot more quickly. And now we have a top level group and a bottom level group, along with some other groups here. All right, so everything lines up. So we've got this line here, and I don't necessarily want that. And this is a good example of like maybe a stairwell where there's a line going across it. So to get rid of that, I'm going to double click into each group and use my eraser tool and hold down the Shift key and just run it right across those edges. So by doing this with the eraser and the Shift key, I'm not erasing it, I'm just hiding it. And that edge is still doing its job of holding the face in. It's just invisible. We've hidden it. So now we can't see it. It looks like one complete face here. And now let's talk about this staircase. So to get to this staircase, I'm going to do the same thing using my tape guidelines, but I am going to put this on its own layer first so that I can hide it. I'm going to open my entity info and I can see that it's on layer 0. And under layers, there's only layer 0. So UPC users, you'll have to add a layer first, and we're going to call it second story or whatever you want to call it. We're going to make it really simple. We're going to add this layer. Mac users, you can just go ahead and create a new layer here. But either way, I need to drop down and assign this to the second story layer. And now when I uncheck the visibility, I can easily hide and unhide that without having to right click and choose hide and then go up to view, unhide all. So now I'm going to use the existing staircase that's already here to create guidelines for the opening. So I'm going to bring a tape guideline, a vertical one, and match it up with this endpoint. And I'm going to use these to begin to mark out the opening. Double click here, double click on this edge. And what I'm looking for are vertical guidelines so that they will go through the floor of my second story floor. Just like so. So now when I double click, I know those edges, those guidelines are going to be really faint, but I can use them to draw my floor. And now when I push that rectangle through, I've got an opening for my staircase. And I can continue to work on that area. So using what is below it is really helpful in developing the second story of our structure, using vertical guidelines by double clicking on the edges. So here is a picture of the finished building. And be on the lookout in the future for a roofs video. I know a lot of you have been asking how I do my roof lines. They are kind of complicated and tedious. And of course, there's lots of different ways to do them. So be on the lookout for that video. And I look forward to hearing from all of you if this was helpful or not. And if you have any other questions about anything else, let me know. Tammy at SketchUp for interiordesigners.com. Thanks, designers.